If you are enjoying the podcast that I make, if you're enjoying the recovery program, then consider liking it, consider sharing it, consider subscribing it, and as well consider making a donation. That would be very helpful. Enjoy this podcast. Hi there, beautiful soul. Thanks for listening to the podcast, and it's already the podcast of October. And before you continue, let's take a really nice and deep breath. Hold it for a while, and then let it all go. Make sure you're not agitated. Don't listen this as a fight or flight mechanism to escape from reality. In the first few modules of the alignment program, it's my attempt to connect you again to reality. And I recorded a podcast about this. I think it was January or February that I released it. And I talked about when we once again connect with our senses and our body, that everything looks different, more colorful, as if everything was a bit weird. And that is because we did not really see those things anymore, because the filters of our mind were too big. Nothing could go through anymore. Very often people on a holiday, they feel in the very first few days, they feel lighter, they feel better, because everything is new then. Their mind hasn't made the concepts about reality and society or the environment where they are. So they're still relatively there until that fades away again. But we don't have to keep being on holidays or escaping ourselves, escaping reality, to find a place where we can still breathe for a while. Because if we connect with the body, if we calm down, if we are really in the present moment, then the things around us, the mountains, the trees, the leaves, the people, they get a different touch. They become real again. But what is changing more is that you are becoming real again. And it was funny that someone in the Facebook group started talking about this, how everything looked different. And I think it's a crucial step, that everything looks different again, that our mind calms down. Of course, there is a reason for the mind to go crazy and rampant. Because chronic fatigue syndrome, the experience itself, is the most stressful thing that I've ever experienced. For the first, let's say 7 to 8 months, I was still relatively functioning. I had intense brain fog, but I was still relatively functioning because my adrenals were still catching up somehow. Today I had a thought about stress and chronic fatigue syndrome, and I thought about this all. And then I realized that the most stressful thing during chronic fatigue syndrome was not being able to cope anymore. So when we have internal stress projected on the external world, we cope by a coping mechanism. The 6th module is all about this. At a certain moment, almost everything we do in life is a coping mechanism. It's not the question anymore of, hey, is this a coping mechanism? But the other way around, what is not a coping mechanism? We cope to avoid feeling. When we can no longer cope, we are forced with feeling. That's intensely stressful. It's also been said that traumatized people, when they get older, when they're in a home for the elderly, when they can't do sports anymore or walk or talk that well, they're also confronted with all the childhood traumas that come up. The same counts as well for chronic fatigue syndrome. I think almost everyone in this world is traumatized. There might be a handful of people who are not. And most people who think they are traumatized are actually not traumatized in the way that they think. Because if you know you're traumatized, then you're not traumatized. A trauma means that you didn't process an event with an emotional load to it. So you sort of shut down, and the energies of the fight or flight that you needed to escape from the situations are still inside of you. Then, over the course of many years, every trigger that triggers this puts you in the fight or flight mode. Yeah, you react with the fight or flight energy to a coping mechanism to avoid feeling. This only enforces the trauma. And the worst types of trauma are the traumas that you don't know that they exist. If there is, for example, a natural disaster, people lose their parents or family members or loved ones, then everyone knows these people are traumatized. Maybe psychological help can come to help people release the traumas. Then, of course, after that, it's still difficult and hard, yet they're not traumatized anymore as soon as they release the emotions and process the events. Yet, what happens if you do not know that you're traumatized, but you feel just weird and different, and you feel that there is a disconnection with the people outside of you and inside of you? You feel estranged from the world. You feel like you don't belong here. Everything feels weird, and you think it's probably your fault. It's because of you. There must be something wrong with you. Not even knowing what happened to you. Very often, people in coachings, it always comes down to emotions frequently. Then they don't remember their childhood. They can say things, I had a really good childhood, yet I don't remember it. In those moments that you don't remember, a lot of bad things might have happened. Things that you still need to process. And with hypnosis and lots of other tools, you can go back to these events and actually remember emotionally what happened and let go of the load. Yet when all these energies come at once, plus you cannot cope anymore, but you're still addicted to stress because at a certain moment you love stress. That's when you function, you want control, you want adrenaline. You can't, and I think that is the most stressful part of a chronic disease. Then, of course, everybody is like, hey, what is wrong with me? What about this symptom? And I've got this symptom, and my symptoms are slightly different, and my symptom is like this. People start arguing each other for their symptoms. Mine is this, and yours is that. I think it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter. Some symptoms are mind body related, some symptoms are trauma related, some symptoms are related to brain rewiring, some symptoms are because of stress that comes up. Well, there are many reasons for stressors to come up, and if you would like to define your own reasons for your specific symptoms and your specific stressors, if you would like some help for that, then we can do that in a coaching. And for a lot of these stressors and symptoms that are related together, we can make them increase, let the symptoms increase, or we can decrease them. We can also make them vanish if we go to the root cause of it. Yet, to go to the root cause of the stressors requires you to be in touch with your body. Yet, when we're not in touch with our bodies, we do that because we're traumatized. Why? Because the emotions and feelings and stress is in our body, and we use thoughts and coping mechanisms to escape. So the first step, especially when you're bedbound, is to calm down. Calm down. Go offline. Rest properly. And yes, this is not the solution for everything. Very often people say resting doesn't work. Yeah, resting alone doesn't work. But it's a good step to make you connect with your body again, to let you see the world in colors again, so that you can have access to whatever is inside of your unconscious mind. The stressors that you're very aware of in your unconscious. And when we release them, you will tell me things like, oh yeah, this has actually have been always with me. Yet it was suppressed. It was repressed. It was hidden for my conscious mind. But it's actually so logical and so obvious. This happened. And yes, that's why I reacted like this. And I always felt a little bit like this. And that made me do things in a certain way, like a coping mechanism. In the previous podcast, I also talked about how life after recovery is actually supposed to be different. It cannot be the same as before. Why? Because you're not living in stress anymore. A life in constant extreme adrenaline and cortisol and stress and pressure is leading towards disease. Sounds very logical. But going back is then not an option, because then you just make sure you fall back in the old trap again. So therefore I called it in the previous podcast uncovering, to uncover yourself, to live your life differently, to heal differently, to be present. A stressed mind wouldn't even want that. They want the magic pill, the magic cure. Have you guys tried this diet? Have you guys tried this supplement? D-ribose? No judgment. We've all been there. Sometimes these protocols that we give to ourselves can give us a form of safety and therefore make the symptoms improve. Therefore, very often we see on these Facebook groups these advice from people. Hello, I've been trying this for 3 days and I feel so much better. Yeah, well, post the same thing maybe after a year or half a year at least. This is not saying anything. Yet what it means, what it's saying to me, if this is the result that fast and you feel slightly better, then for me it means that you feel safe by following a protocol. But as soon as you realize that the protocol won't do long-term fast results into de-stressing yourself, into uncovering yourself, then you will realize it was a good attempt, but it wasn't it. Yeah, most people then who are very stressed, they find the next thing. And after several years, if you're just like me, you might have spent $10,000 on stuff and junk, only to not give up the old paradigm of the old world, the world where we are very stressed. Once I spent some money on acupuncture, and it took like 40 minutes. It was a very nice and warm place with a very nice thing to lay down on. The music was very calming. The presence of the therapist was very calming. And then the needles. And then afterwards I felt better. But I analyzed this. Like, is it the needles that made me feel better? So I tried to make the same thing happening. Put a really nice place to lay down, go offline, nice calming music, warm place, maybe some candles, really cozy, and lay down for a while. And then I realized that was actually making me feel better. And I could do that for free. Did not need to go to that therapist. I did not have to spend, I think it was 60 euros for this, to lay down calmly with myself. Yet, when we also meditate, maybe you've done some meditation or you've tried it in recovery because people are recommending it. When you do something like that alone and you're stressed, and it's very hard, and you are tempted to stop and do something, because when you stop, everything that can come up and your mind can ramble about the things that you have to do. And it doesn't take long with your phone in your hands and seeking up something else. And then You see, oh, there is a post on Facebook, and oh, there is a comment, and oh my God, and someone is posting something against me. And maybe there is this man called Daniel who is posting really weird stuff that doesn't really resemble my values of being stressed. But maybe somehow it resonates with me as well, otherwise you wouldn't listen to this. Looking at my own healing process, I can tell you that healing keeps getting better. That also means it's continuing. It's a continuation. We keep healing ourselves. Healing means to become whole again. Healing also means to remember who you are. That is one of the biggest leaps that I've made in recovery. There were a few leaps, like a moment, and after that there was a new plateau reached, and I was stable on a different plateau. And the final plateau that I hit was because of my memory of who I am, my memory of the truth, my memory of what I'm doing here. What the hell is going on here on this planet? Who am I, and what am I? And I can't give you your answers. Yet in silence, you can remember this. You can remember who you are. And it doesn't mean that it comes straight away, because in the beginning, or you might experience with meditation. Meditation is just a fancy word for doing nothing, by the way. And a guided meditation is more of a mindfulness thing. Mindfulness is a good step in meditation, to get quiet, to let the mind be quiet, to don't follow your impulses, just to sit with yourself. And it can give you really a relaxed vibe until stressors come up, of course. So in remembering who you really are, you can feel some of your peace maybe after a few meditation sessions. And that might feel familiar. And then you can deepen into that. You can connect more with the one inside, the one that is always observing, that observes you being ill, that observes you being stressed, that observes your thoughts, that observes your thoughts about your thoughts, that observes your stress addiction, that observes everything. We can only become who we really are when we stop coping. And to stop coping, we have to release stress and as well become conscious about our coping addiction, conscious about our adrenaline addiction. And slowly by slowly, you get glimpses. They might not be that ecstatic as what you're hoping for, because they're usually very silent and calm and peaceful. And that might be your nature. And maybe when you're very lucky, you can remember more, just like I did. But it's not going to make your world different if you have these mystical experiences. They are the cherry on the ice. They're not the ice cream. They can make everything just a little bit more pragmatic. Remembering the truth. Remembering the truth means that you don't need scientists anymore to explain reality to you. That sounds weird, it sounds almost like a conspiracy theorist. But it also means that you can stand inside of yourself, know your true power, and also know that everything that happened to you came because you did not believe anymore in yourself. That is, of course, not your fault. It's part of the illusion here on planet Earth. And sooner or later, we started believing in an illusion. The illusion that we're not free. The illusion that we're unworthy. The illusion that we need someone else. And that might have been true as a child, but it's not true anymore. Because if you remember your true power, then you're not a victim. You can't be a victim, even not in the midst of a terrible chronic fatigue syndrome crash. You cannot be a victim. You can't. It's not an option anymore. And you also can't manipulate it. You can't be manipulated anymore into doing anything. You cannot manipulate yourself anymore in these coping behaviors. And you cannot be manipulated by the outside world because you want something from outside of yourself, whether it be safety, love, or whatever. You don't get these things outside of yourself. A lot of people who do coping mechanisms, they always need more, because you always need more from that which you don't need, because you're chasing the wrong things. And what most people chase is unconditional love for themselves, and they want to get it outside of themselves. And then you get these deals. I love you if you love me, and you love me and if I love you, and there are all kinds of rules. But what we're doing to ourselves is conditional love again. And that is maybe as well the root cause behind the most traumas and illusions that we have about ourselves. So yeah, I'm planning to update the 13th module in this theme, to get back to reality, to get back to the true self and see the world and ourselves in colors again, to remember ourselves again, to change it slightly. The 13th module is about not being manipulated. And the biggest manipulator to us are we ourselves. For example, for me, life after recovery is still sometimes a struggle. It's, it's my goal and it's my desire to keep working as a health coach. I really receive lots of pleasure and joy and fulfillment from doing this job. It also humbles me, and it makes me connect with others, but also I see, these parts that I had in myself in those people, my clients, parts that were there just a few years ago, So it's not like I'm that far ahead of you. Don't see me as a mystical guru or something, just a helper, trying to make you help for the next step. And if, my chronic fatigue syndrome lasted several years, if you have only a few years or only 1 year, and you don't even know, or maybe if you find me in the beginning and you don't even know how terrible chronic fatigue syndrome can become, and you don't even value me for my work, then that would be my goal. That you don't even know what happened. There was just someone who guided you and you felt fine again. And then you could live. You could live your uncovered life. So in my uncovered life, I still have to become aware of my coping mechanisms, my addictions, and my rigidity and my self-pressure. So because I want to be a health coach, I compare myself sometimes with other health coaches who have lots of content and maybe even screaming messages. Sometimes very, very often messages I can't really agree with. It's too black or white, and black or white is more stress related. And maybe this is as well feeding or serving people who are extremely stressed. But yet I compare myself with this and I judge them. And then I come up with strategies for myself. Like, how could I reach more people so that I can, be secure in my life, where I want to be able to live from the recovery program and live from the coachings. And then I came up in November last year to update every Saturday at least a video. And later I came up with a strategy to upload every first Saturday of the month a podcast. And I realized I can't keep up with it. I feel so much pressure now after 10 months of doing this. And I don't like it anymore. I really can't stand the camera on my face anymore. I don't want to do it anymore. Yet I would like to continue making content, but different. Not me behind the desk telling you what to do, but more like inspirational podcast, maybe podcast about calming people down. And I've been making music lately to use these in the background of some beautiful images. That is what I'm hoping for. And that's what I'm going to do, but I can't promise anymore every Saturday or something to release something, because I can't keep up with this old paradigm. I just can't do it. And I think that is as well, we have to acknowledge that we cannot pressure ourselves into doing things. But how does self-pressure feel like when you don't know anything else? So when am I pressuring myself? Am I pressuring myself right now to make this podcast? Are you pressuring yourself right now to listen to me? These are interesting questions. What are we really doing with our time? I think whenever we are stressed or trying to reach something, try to walk away or trying to follow a strategy, we're actually making the energy inside of us smaller. It means that we don't trust life, or our energy weakens, and then we are, of course, as well prone for manipulation. If we, in those moments, then meditate, when you have become a little bit better in meditation, then after a meditation you can feel the pressures that you usually put on yourselves, because you haven't reacted on these pressures for, let's say, 30 minutes. And then you can cry out these pressures. And then afterwards, you don't even feel a need to do what you wanted to do during the meditation. So the meditation actually lasts longer by going with it. Not because you want to or you have to, because it's a logical consequence. And then after that, we keep being in the parasympathetic nervous system. The rest and digest mode. What's really funny about what I'm telling you right now is, from a spiritual perspective, there are a lot of people who want to be enlightened. Then there are a lot of meditation gurus who tell you that you have to meditate. So, let's say Eckhart Tolle, he was depressed, he was miserable, and he didn't see the colors of the world. You might be like them, like him, just like I was as well. Then at a certain moment, it became just too extreme for Eckhart Tolle. He was too miserable, and the miserable was so extreme, just like I do with the self-hypnosis, fear release, the worst case scenario, and it just gets out of your system and suddenly you're there again. That's what happened to Eckhart Tolle as well. Suddenly he was here and he was now. And he looked at the world and everything looked different. He was, in that moment, in the parasympathetic nervous system. That's all. He was not enlightened. He's not a guru. He was in the parasympathetic nervous system. You can go to gurus, to monks, to monasteries to become enlightened. But whatever you're seeking is the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest mode. Something that has been almost forgotten in the Western world. And the ones who have it, they will never seek enlightenment because they feel good. They don't want to change anything. They're enjoying life. They can see all the busy people around them trying to chase enlightenment or the next best thing, or wasting their life with coping mechanisms like working hard or chasing women or doing whatever. They have no desire to get enlightened. This means that only disturbed people are seeking enlightenment. And who are disturbed people? That are people who are traumatized. Probably because of an unknown reason. Probably not even aware of their trauma. Or not capable of releasing the trauma. And therefore not being able to switch off the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight mode. That's all. In the ninth module, I talk about it from a spiritual perspective via the so-called levels of consciousness from David R. Hawkins. What you see in these levels is that the lower levels of consciousness are based upon resisting emotions due to trauma. And the higher levels of consciousness are about releasing stress and not being in a level of resistance, no longer against yourself or life. then something happens inside of you. And David R. Hawkins measured this. Plus as well, Joe Dispenza measured this. The energy that we have inside of ourselves, from the different brains of the body as well, they harmonize. And your energy is going to enforce, how do you say this? Your energy is going to get stronger because of the harmony. Then your energy will be measured further away from your body. This means that your energy is influencing things in your direct environment. And this can be blocks away from your body. The further you get in these so-called levels of consciousness, which are basically about releasing resistance and stepping into the flow of life and surrendering to life itself. Before, in the lower levels of resistance and trauma, you are looking to life via the filter of the mind that is basically there via lots of protocols and strategies, to-do lists. Life is hard work, and you need to keep up with everything that you think that you have to do. Because if you don't, life will fall apart, and you don't get things done, and you don't get your needs met. That is the lower level of consciousness. It's constant work. It's sort of like living like an ant. Maybe you've observed ants in recovery. It's always good to get back in touch with life, and maybe you can see ants again. Notice that you didn't really watch ants for the last 20 years or something. The life of an ant feels very mechanical to me. Hard work. Yet when we get more in touch with ourselves, when we're not anymore living from a level of resistance, and our energy harmonizes, and we can release negative emotions and energies that are inside of us, energies that I call stressors. Maybe it's well coming via belief systems that we have adopted. Our energy gets stronger, and we can influence our environment. And it will seem from that point on that life comes to you instead of you having to do anything. In the book Power versus Force, he called these lower levels force, like forcing something on yourself and the world. And these higher levels are power. It's like the image of this meditation guru. And whenever he thinks about something, he sets something in motion in the past and it comes to him directly. That's sort of the energy of power. That is as well the energy of freedom. So what we're talking about when we talk about freedom is probably the freedom of the tyrannical egoic mind that makes us do lots of things and makes us be in resistance. Finding Freedom is as well a book from Raylan Eagle. It's about recovery as well. I haven't read the book. I doubt it if it's going really deep into this question about freedom versus the opposite, which is probably fear. Because how free can life actually be like? What is really possible? If you are thinking about this topic right now, maybe you've already discovered that you do not want to live anymore a mechanical life where everything is hard work. Maybe you fantasize about, or dream, let's say dream about a life, living off the land, making your own vegetables, not working full-time anymore in an office or being online all the time. Then that is already a different perception about what freedom is. And as I've discovered, it's not really free. Because I've lived that life now. There is more. There is more freedom that is possible. I started to doubt and to ask myself these questions of what freedom can be like more. what is again possible? And then I noticed that this perception of freedom that I had is still a perception of not really being debt free, but it was the next step. Because I'm still in this level, I'm still imprisoned by how I think that life is supposed to be. I'm as well imprisoned by the limitations of my body. I have to get the sleep, I have to work on the land, I need the land, I need to eat, therefore I need a toilet. And that is still very normal, but it still feels a little bit like there is some imprisonment going on for me. Especially since I remember my true nature. It doesn't resemble that really. So I think there is more possible. I think I can be wilder in my imagination. I've as well come across this man 2 years ago who doesn't eat and doesn't sleep anymore. He tells that needing food is related to having lots of fear inside of our body. It makes us more dense, it makes us more material, and then we need a food from food sources. But he says that we can train ourselves into getting our energy from that what we really are. And this as well was a memory from me, like, yes, I think I can do that. So that's something that I would like to pursue. But that's me personally, that's my level. That's my level of finding freedom. It's as well a continuation as well. It's just like healing. Healing means to become whole again with all the aspects, more than we can, think about when we are not really free completely. I think life and maybe the wheel of life with all the karma and the different lives that we live is as well a journey about finding freedom. But whenever we resist something that we have all the good reasons for to resist, then we're not really free. In the 12th module, I also talk about dualities and how we need to accept both parts of a duality, weakness and strength. For example, that is a recent one that I talked about in a coaching. Because the funny thing is that as soon as you bulldoze your weakness and emphasize your strength, that you become weak. So then it's sort of an opportunity to reconnect back with your weakness so you can be strong again, to eventually drop this label of this coin of strong weakness completely, because it doesn't matter anymore. And who decides as well the limits of the boundary, the border between one side of the coin and the other side? That's what we do ourselves. And maybe in that judgment, we are actually representing the energy from our parents or people that bullied us or teachers that were not nice to us. So whenever we judge something, it is always coming out of trauma. Again, we wanted to emphasize something else, maybe to get loved, to receive more unconditional love. And then we're again hidden or trapped, in a hidden duality that is not freedom. Previously, when I thought about this podcast, I had it in mind for almost 2 months. I wanted to talk about everything we do out of fear. Everything we do out of resistance then as well. But I decided not to make this podcast because it would be too negative. Because, for example, for me, even before I was born, the doctor was afraid that my twin sister was not being able to make it because he couldn't measure her heart rate. And then he decided to get us out of the belly, to get us out of the womb. That was a decision based on fear. And then everything was fine, and he was like, okay, well, at least I did this thing out of fear, because now everything is all right. But that is not really what the flow of life is all about. It's rather the opposite. So if we then look at children, the way that people let children cry, for example, because they're afraid that they might be too weak. Then by the age of 4, I had to go to primary school. And, before that, I learned to talk and to walk and do lots of things. But after the age of 4, suddenly it was all being tracked, my progress. It felt like suddenly nobody believed anymore in the natural learning behavior of me. And when I worked in a primary school for a while, it really felt that way, that we don't rely anymore on the natural flow when it comes to learning for children. And then move on, we pressure children. We tell them things like, if you don't follow my thing that I'm doing here because of fear, then you might end up on the gutter and having no job in life. So we put fear on someone else to justify our own fear. And then, let's don't make this podcast. Everything we do from a certain moment in time is because of fear. Whether it is a job, whether it is the agricultural system, whether it is the financial system, the schooling industry, housing industry. It's all because of fear and limitations. That means that we believe in illusion. The illusion of that there is not enough, for example, that we're not good enough. That means we have been manipulated, maybe by suggestions that we're not good enough, or we chose at some point to believe a limitation. And that is, of course, natural. That is normal, because we're very vulnerable in those first few years of our life on planet Earth. And the people who manipulated it or make us believe suggestions and false ideas were also manipulated. So it's sort of inevitable that we come here to forget about our natural state, only to then find freedom again, to find out once again who we really are. Then, going back to recovery from a chronic disease. If we, after recovery, want to maintain a stressful image, like for example for me, I want to keep up with other health coaches that are being much more assertive, much more black and white than I do, telling people what to do, as well making fancy programs to sell via these American sales model that we see frequently in life. If I want to do that as well, to maintain a lifestyle, to maintain an image about me where I'm not really authentic, then I'm not really recovered in that moment. Then I'm just going back and I'm going to be a personality once again. But that personality will catch up on me eventually again, because I'm again not my authentic self. My authentic self is the one that whispers, the one that is very silent, the one that doesn't need screaming, the one that allows everything. But when it all gets too much for my authentic self, then he will give me a present. We can call this present an illness that forces me to drop all the labels, to drop all the thoughts, to drop all the coping mechanisms. So yes, therefore, I choose to be different. I choose to do things differently. I am different. I must acknowledge that. I must work that way, the other way around, and I must trust that the flow of life will bring me what I need when I'm stepping into the energy of my authentic self. And that's a leap of faith. I must trust. Sometimes things happen as well in this journey, let's say it like that, of trying to become a health coach, trying to earn a living this way. that makes me question or makes me doubt if this can succeed. Maybe not a few bookings for a few days, or last week my internet site broke down. Then as well, the podcast RSS feed that I use deleted some of my meditations, and it's still not really working well. Then another day, there was a man who owed me money for something that I sold him, and he didn't want to pay. All of these things can get me out of the flow, can get me back into fear, or it can trigger fear that is inside of me. So I want to react, in those moments. But if I meditate, if I don't react on this, and it's hard, it's not easy for me as well. I'm not this guy who is the image of perfection. If I watch myself, if I watch my urges, and if I don't act, just like I meditated on the thought as well, should I upload a movie every week? And I didn't react. During the meditation, I wanted to start working on everything. Just like in the other meditation, I wanted to react on the man who bought something from me, then did not want to pay. I wanted to react, but I did not. And in both of these things, after like 30 minutes of meditation, I had to cry, and maybe an old fear was released, or maybe the pressure that I put on myself was becoming visible, and I had to release the pressure that was built up over the course of 10 months. Then I feel free again. Then I am free from these energies. Then I'm not reacting anymore. And that is as well freedom of recovery. And then suddenly, because I acted completely different, I reconnected with also sort of a traumatic event in childhood where I did not, stood up for myself, but that can sound very like a fight or flight. But I just told that I do not agree with this, like I should have done in childhood as well. I said, this is unfair. I do not agree with this. I want something else. Just, a short statement like that. And everything changed. I got my payment. I was good again. So yeah. Just 30 minutes of meditation is the most productive thing that I could do whenever there was a problem. And I also then thought about new content that I would like to make. And I bought a camera, a good camera. And let's see what things can become. I'm going to make different content. I don't really know how. I don't really know why. But it's going to be different. And different. Healing differently. It's the opposite of healing indifferent. I wish you a beautiful day. I wish you lots of connection with your true self. A big hug. Bye.